Hello, Wild Willie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Hi guys, welcome back to Wild Willie's Book Reviews. Today I'm here with the Canadian author Lawrence Hill, and I reviewed this book on my channel already, Beatrice and Croc Harry, which is a great book, so make sure you go check out that video. But what inspired you to start writing children's books?
Well, it wasn't so much something that inspired me specifically and generally to start writing children's books. What happened was that when Beatrice, the youngest of my five children, came into my life when she was 3 years old in a blended family, I started telling her bedtime stories to sort of stitch together our relationship with this new child who suddenly landed in my family and whom was suddenly a new daughter of mine. And so she was 3, 4, 5, 6 years old at this time. And she just loved hearing these ridiculous bedtime stories about girl versus crocodile. And this fictional girl was named Beatrice, just like she was. And she was always feuding with a crocodile and narrowly escaping the jaws of death. And Beatrice, my daughter, loved these stories about the fictional Beatrice outfoxing this crocodile. And those stories sat around in my brain for about 15 years until finally I felt ready to actually turn it into a novel and write what became Beatrice and Croc Harry. So it wasn't so much a thought, well, now I'm going to write a children's novel. It was more a thought, now I feel ready to write the story, a bigger story about Beatrice and Croc Harry that's been kicking around in my heart for really about 15 years.
So, what inspired you to start writing just books in general? Like, was it a school project or was it just your love of reading and writing?
What inspired me to start writing in general?
Yeah.
Well, my dad, was an African-American immigrant to Canada. My mother was a white American immigrant who married and fell in love with my dad. And then they moved to Canada from the States the day after they married as an interracial couple. And my dad and mom, my dad especially, were obsessed by the notion that being immigrants, of a Black father, that we should learn to read and write so we could become professionals later on. He hoped that we would become professionals, doctors, lawyers, engineers. So he made me write letters for the things I wanted when I was a boy. And I remember even at the age of 6, I wanted a kitten and he said no. And I asked the second time, he said no. And on the third request, he said, go up to your room and write me a letter and tell me why you deserve to have that cat and who will pay for its cat food and how you'll prevent it from having babies in the closet. And if you can write me a good letter, Larry, with no spelling mistakes, I'll give your request due consideration. So I just poured my heart into this letter, pleading for the right to have a kitten named Smokey. And he gave me the cat once he read the letter. And after that, I just kept hitting him up with more letters for more requests. New pair of Levi jeans, first pair of Adidas Rom running shoes, permission to stay out later and play in the streets after the street lights came on. Every time I wanted something that he didn't want to give me, I just write him another letter. So I became a passionate writer as a child to persuade my father to give me stuff he didn't want to give me. And this just led me to write and write and write. And the next thing I knew, I was writing short stories. So I was hooked really as a writer as a child because I wanted to get stuff that my father didn't want to give me. So that was how I really became a writer, as a letter writer first, and later on as a short story and novel writer.
What do you think your favorite part about writing is? Like, is it writing books and in this case, writing a book for children, or just enjoying people enjoying your work?
My favorite part of writing is being alone in a room and having the courage and the focus and the confidence to just turn off all peripherals, the cell phone, the TV, the internet, and just dig into my own heart and imagination and see what's there. And I like to imagine that locked up in my heart is a big fat suitcase filled with all sorts of interesting things that somebody else has packed. Maybe God above has packed, or maybe the stars above have packed. And I don't even know what's in that big suitcase in my heart. But every day my job when I'm writing is to reach into that suitcase and start pulling stuff out and be surprised by what's lingering and loitering and kicking around in my own heart. Because you don't even know what's down there and what you're ready to sort of give birth to each day when you start writing. And to me, the favorite part of writing is the surprise of finding things kicking around in my heart that I didn't even know were there, pulling stuff out of the suitcase that was packed by somebody else, that suitcase in my heart. And that's what my favorite part of writing is, discovering the unexpected in my own heart and landing it on the page.
So with all the ideas in your head, do you think that you'll write any more children's books, or do you think that you'll go back to writing adult books?
My next book is a book for adults that I was working on before I started writing Beatrice and Quack Harry, and that I'm going back to. So it's going to take me a year or two to finish that adult book. But after that, I would love to write a sequel to Beatrice and Quack Harry. I love the friendship, the unlikely friendship between girl and crocodile, and I left the ending wide open, as you probably noticed. And I'd really love to step back in and send Beatrice and Quack Harry and their friends back for another round of adventures in the forests of Argelia. So yes to a sequel, but first I have to write a book for adults.
I can't wait to read that book. So what do you think what's the thing that you're most excited for going to Read by the Sea in July 1st and July 2nd?
Well, I've been invited actually several times in the past to Read by the Sea, and unfortunately, each time I was invited, I was just tied up with other obligations, usually promoting an earlier book of mine. And some of those books took a lot out of me and required me to travel a lot around the world and in other countries. And unfortunately, each time I was invited, I had other obligations to do with earlier books of mine, such as The Illegal or The Book of Negroes or Any Known Blood or Blackberry Sweet Juice. And so finally, I was invited, and miraculously, this time I had a big hole in my schedule, and I say, yes, I can actually come. So I was inspired to accept, because the people at Read by the Sea have been patiently inviting me for years, and finally it looks like it can work. So I'm really looking forward to coming to River John, Nova Scotia, on July 1st and 2nd. And I have been many, many times in Nova Scotia to give public talks and readings and to research my earlier books. So I'm really happy that this time in a visit to Nova Scotia, I can go to a community that I haven't been to before, which is River John.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you there, which I am sure that I will see you at Read by the Sea, so I can't wait for that. What do you think that is there something that you do in particular when you write? Like, for example, a different ritual?
Well, I like to doodle. And I couldn't draw to save my life. Like if you asked me to draw a cow, honestly, like the drawing that I put down on the page would be unrecognizable and nobody would even know that I was trying to draw a cow. So art was like the only class that I almost failed in school. Other than that, I was a really good, serious student, but I just sucked at art, and I still do. And so don't please ever ask me to draw or illustrate anything. But I do like to doodle. Maybe it's a nervous habit. Maybe I just do it to sort of settle my mind down. But I often doodle and scribble all these ridiculous forms and shapes, while I'm writing or while I'm thinking. But I think it's just a way of kind of relaxing and focusing my mind. So that's one little habit of mine. I like to doodle on a blank page, with a pen or a pencil while I'm on phone calls or while I'm researching or thinking or reading. But other than that, I type and I handwrite. Usually I might type a first draft and then I'll handwrite a second and a third draft. So I like to do both. It seems that as I get older, I'm going back more and more to handwriting, which I find often leads me to more creative places than typing, you say on a word processor or computer. I like to get at it several times a day when I'm writing. So early in the morning and then back at it in the afternoon and evening. So I'm sort of like one of those writers who's either all on or all off. I wish I could say I wrote every day, but it's more like binge writing. So when I'm writing, there's a lot of it going on every day. When I'm not writing, maybe I'm researching or promoting or traveling or something like that. I was wondering, actually, Wild Willie, I'm really curious if you might tell me or share a few thoughts about what it was about Beatrice and Quack Harry that you found kind of interesting or intriguing. Was there a part of this story that kind of caught your attention or your interest? I'd love to know.
I did really like the first time that Beatrice met Quack Harry, and they kind of had the talk back and forth, and Beatrice was still kind of scared and nervous because she wasn't used to animals talking to her, and I found that really intrigued me to keep reading.
Thank you. Yeah, I did love the interplay between the two of them. And I love the fact that here we have a crocodile with a huge vocabulary who's talking at this girl and throwing out all sorts of words that she doesn't even fully understand. And she's got to consult a dictionary just to keep up with him. And I like their dialogue, and I've always loved writing dialogue, and I love the kind of sparky conversations that they have, and I found them quite endearing. So it was, for me, a special part of writing the book was working on the dialogue between Beatrice and Croc Harry.
What do you think is the biggest difference in between writing for adults and writing for kids?
Well, I don't know that I can say generally that this is the difference, but I can say specifically what was different for me in writing this book compared to, say, the books I've written for adults. So I want to be careful to say this is my experience in writing this book, but I'm not pretending that this is the experience generally of all writers. But in my case, what happened with Beatrice and Croc Harry is that I got to tell a story that was purely out of my own heart and imagination. I didn't have to write a story that was authentically trying to reproduce, say, the history or the current living conditions of, say, Blacks or African Canadians, which has been something that I've explored, in all of my other adult books. I didn't have to worry about authentically replicating social circumstances or historical situations or the story of slavery or segregation. I just got to write out of my own imagination and create a world that was invented and kind of a bit magical, a bit impossible, but hopefully entertaining. And to have a talking crocodile and a talking tarantula and a talking lemur, and to put all these characters together. And of course, for me, the talking crocodile and lemur and rabbit and tarantula, they're all meant to have human emotions and human-like personalities. So for me, of course, they're animals, but I thought of them as people, with the hearts and the minds and the thoughts and the emotions of people, even though, of course, they're animals. And I got to do that because I was just making up a fantasy for children. So I felt I got to be more playful, more kind of experimental, and go kind of more wild with my imagination than I got to go with the other books that I've written for adults. So I really liked that I got to be more playful, more silly, kind of more over the top, funnier, more ridiculous, and to play, to get out and dance and play on the page as a writer. So really what it felt like was kind of going to that place when I was a father with young children. I mean, I have 5 children. They're all grown and finished university and adults now. But when they were children, one of the things I loved most as a dad was just to tell wild bedtime stories and to see their eyes light up at the end of the bed and just to tell them crazy stories that hopefully were entertaining, but also had deep meaning and relevance in some way to their lives. And I loved being a bedtime storytelling dad. It was a great feeling. I got to be silly and crazy and inventive and playful. And it feels great to engage a child like that at bedtime and to see their eyes light up if you're doing a good job with a story. And that was the energy that I was looking to create in this book, kind of the energy of a good bedtime storytelling dad kind of person. And that was a feeling I was looking for and going for in this book. It felt great to write it. It made me feel quite happy, actually, to tell that story.
Do you feel like throughout your book there was for example, the bunny that wanted Beatrice to teach him to read? Do you feel like your love of learning kind of also helped you create that book?
Yes, I think my love of learning and my love of language, I've always loved language. I've also always loved silly words, like, say, the word that I kind of made up in the book, goozlem. It's an invented word that represents the human soul. The idea is that in your body, there's this mysterious organ called the goozlem that you only get to have if you're a good person with a kind soul. And so this goozlem is an organ that represents the human soul. And I love that idea. It's quite silly and ridiculous. And of course, course, the goozulum is located in the body just a bit above the hippoflump, if you're looking for the location of the goozulum. And so I love to kind of play with silly words and to fool around with language, which is a great joy of mine. And I've always tried to help my children appreciate kind of the silliness and the play of language too, which readers love, and I think, and which of course writers need too. Writers need to play with language. That's our tool, that's what we do. And because I love language so much, I was hoping that the book would help a child feel the love of language too, and to feel that kind of the idea of just fooling around with language can be quite entertaining. Maybe a child who sees all the made up words in the book, or a young reader, maybe they'll think of some words that they can make up, which is great. And so the other thing is that I was trying to write about some serious issues that mean a lot to me: confronting social justice, confronting racial discrimination and racial hatred. And Beatrice has to do these things in the book. And because there are some heavy issues, there's even some violence, in the back half of the book that unfortunately that Beatrice experiences through no fault of her own. I needed to sort of counterbalance the heavier issues with lightness and play and silliness and kind of over-the-top writing, some exaggeration and entertainment. So I was looking to walk that line between writing about serious and painful issues and writing with playfulness and comedy and language play as well. So that's what I was trying to do in this book: some serious issues, but also, a playful approach.
Is there anything that you would want to say to anybody watching this video that might want to become an author, or that is an author that needs some help?
Well, I would say that if you want to be a writer, be confident that you have a story inside yourself that nobody else has. Everybody has a story. Everybody has feelings. Everybody has a unique and individual way of looking at the universe, whether it's the relationship you have with a dog or a cat, or with a person in your life, whether it's a happy or a difficult relationship, or a little bit of both. You've had an experience that is yours and yours alone. And bizarrely, even though it's yours and yours alone, it might seem like a tiny little insignificant thing. That very tiny little seemingly insignificant thing in your life is exactly what might make your story universal, and what might make a reader feel, yeah, I can identify with that. I haven't experienced it, but I love the way this person writes about this issue that they were living. And so I'd say that the trick is to have confidence that your stories are worthwhile, and that your life is rich, and that it's worth exploring your imagination, your heart, your lived experiences, and maybe even your research to do your own thing and to tell your own story in the way that seems unique and special to you. And have confidence that your story is worthwhile and worth exploring. And the very intimacy and privateness and individuality of your story is exactly what might make it universally appealing.
So yeah, thank you so much for your time. And is there anything else that you would want to say?
That's it for now, Wild Willie, but I really thank you for your interest in the book, and I can't wait to come out to Nova Scotia and come to River John and meet people at Read by the Sea. And I hope that your readers will enjoy not just Beatrice and Croc Harry, but all the books that they discover over the years to come, because reading and the pleasure of reading is such a great thing that you can take for your whole life. So I hope all of you, who are watching, have loads of fun reading in the years to come.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you at Read by the Sea, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for the interview. We'll see you in a few months.
Yeah.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too. See ya.